Awesome. You can go to the next slide. So we have a couple learning objectives for you today. First, we're going to name some real and perceived barriers that might impede your upstream implementation efforts. But we're also going to give you some practical strategies that will either help eliminate or mitigate those barriers. And then, along with the activity we have planned for your homework and the case study today and discussion, we hope that you leave this session feeling empowered to address barriers that you might have and continue moving forward in your upstream prevention efforts. Next slide, please. So Janelle and I both felt that it was important to acknowledge that as lovely as Idaho is, we are sometimes dealing with um, policies or legislation that actively doesn't do a lot to support some of our vulnerable populations or create some limitations with the tools and resources that are available for us to support students. We're not going to go into any of those today, but again, it's just important to address that we know that that's out there and that can sometimes feel frustrating and that our hands are tied, but we still think there's a lot of meaningful work we can do within the context of working in Idaho. And I'm going to now bounce it back over to Janelle, who's going to talk about our first three barriers.
Yeah, go ahead and move to the next slide. Hannah and I met together and acknowledged many barriers that we are aware of, as well as many resources, and we limited it just to this handful that we're going to present today. And I have the opportunity to start with the first three. Um, and again, I want to acknowledge, as Hannah stated, that there are barriers bigger than these barriers sometimes that can limit. But I know in the work that we do that we're always finding ways to work around it and do find ways to work around those. So, but let's talk first about one that's near and dear to my heart, of course, as a clinical social worker providing mental health care in the communities that I serve, and that is stigma around mental health and help seeking. This is considered a pretty significant barrier, one of which comes from something much bigger than all of us, but lives in all of us, and that's cultural norms or some of the ways our dominant culture favors things like self-reliance, being tough, pulling ourselves up by our bootstraps, and mental health being a private thing that can't be shared. And those stigmas tend to create a barrier for people seeking help if we're relying on that. Even if how we ask people to seek help, even in the ways we encourage people to seek help, we're reliant on this self-reliance thing. We require them to ask for help and then wait for them for that to happen, and we're missing a lot of people in that. There's a fear of being labeled, disciplined, or sent elsewhere. So we're going to talk a lot about that in these solutions. And then youth often associate mental health support with crisis and not care. And to stay in line with this conversation we've been having since September, we are interested in going upstream and catching things before it gets real bad. And crisis is downstream. So if we're waiting for that crisis to be when we implement mental health care, then we've missed the upstream marker. And a lot of times our kids, our students will wait to seek help until it's crisis. And we want to move that to something different. We can switch to the next slide, please. Something really important to understand in upstream work is that stigma is reinforced by systems, not just the belief within each individual. Stigma is reinforced also when systems rely on referral-only models, waiting for something to be wrong with you before we respond. And crisis-driven responses teach students to wait until things fall apart. The upstream model is to catch way above that crisis. When mental health is built into programming, students don't feel like something's wrong with them for needing support. So let's talk about these upstream ideas we have here. I have two shifts. We'll move to the next slide. We need to move from referral only models. The referral model is the dominant way of doing mental health support in this culture that we live in. We reach out and say, here's a referral for somebody, reach out to them and respond. Um, and I'm suggesting that we change that to consultation models. So what do I mean when I say consultation models? Instead of sending a student away, we partner around the student. So the old way, the old referral model way, a teacher would notice a student is maybe withdrawing or acting out, most likely acting out. Those are the ones that get the most direct attention, fills out a referral form. The student is maybe pulled from class when there's time in the schedule to do that. Could be soon, could be a few weeks later. Teacher never hears a follow-up, and the student learns maybe from that process something is wrong with me. The new model, the teacher would schedule a 10-minute consult with counselor, perhaps other interventionists, and the conversation focuses on what's being seen, what might be happening underneath the behavior, and a conversation about what can happen right there in class or in other systems. That way, the student stays in class and the teacher stays involved. We're going to expand on this a little bit more. Um, the student isn't removed in this case, that instead the system comes in around the student, and that's considered an upstream prevention model. Another thing that might happen in the referral only model is we send them out to counseling. And as a counselor, I'm a big fan of counseling, but in these systems, that is not enough. It is not upstream enough to catch it above. What we want to do instead is support them where the stress is showing up. So we might then, in these kind of conversations, suggest ask questions like, what is happening in this system that might be contributing to what is going on here? What are there built-in supports within the system that allow us to respond? And so it shifts responsibility not on one individual teacher, not on one individual counselor, and puts the responsibility on the system entirely. We'll expand more on this next one. That we'll go to the next slide. I keep pushing my space button. I guess I should have done it myself, Shannon. Okay, shift two. Another upstream approach to addressing this is changing our language around mental health, around all people interfacing with these kids. It's very simple, consistent language where we change from statements like acting out or attention seeking or overreacting or defiant and lazy, and instead use descriptors of their nervous system, such as regulated versus dysregulated. In this way, we're understanding that there's a state change going on within the individual, not a character flaw going on within the individual. And it shifts from judgment to understanding and moves into solutions. Yeah, moves from a biased language into something easier to digest. And then, of course, connection before correction, replacing immediate discipline within school systems into first safety and connection and quiet check-ins to support the nervous system. We look instead of things like unmotivated or manipulative as things that are related to skill gaps, not character flaws. This is really present in neurodivergent kids, kids who have experienced trauma, kids who are experiencing racialized stress. And talks about what might have happened during times of development that might have impacted the state of their nervous system. And those are skills that can be learned. When schools lack this shared language that moves from trying to use as bias language instead of regulation language, the student becomes dependent on which teacher, the inconsistent responses between teachers because of that, and might even be impacted by implicit bias in that situation. So, in the mental health bias portion of this is only step one. There are more barriers that remain once stigma moves away, and that's what we're going to talk about next. So let's move to the next slide. When stigma is reduced, students will still face barriers that have nothing to do with willingness and everything to do with access. So, removing stigma is just the first part of access. So let's talk about that next. We have high expectations of teachers in responding to these mental health things. We think, oh, we need to train teachers to have more training in behavioral health or mental health. Or we'll say teachers should check in more. Or we say, why didn't somebody catch this? And we want to replace that in this upstream model with statements that sound like this. Teachers need systems that make well-being possible within their role. Have we created a structure for check-ins? And was our system designed to check this? When we rely only on the teacher's point of contact with students to be the responsive, we will miss too many and we'll burn out teachers. And so we need to go upstream and look at what is built into the system that makes help seeking easier. Um, what we often expect teachers to do is notice every student, differentiate between behavior, trauma, anxiety, depression, manage emotions and curriculum. We expect them to know when to refer and how, and to do this with as limited time and training. Burnout can happen and we'll miss a lot of students. Let's move to the next slide. When access to support depends on teachers alone, we are going to miss the students. Our quiet kids, our compliant kids, the marginalized or global majority kids are the most likely to be noticed. Unnoticed, teachers may delay action because they don't have time, which is relevant. I'm not sure this is serious enough, and I don't want to overreact. So what can systems do instead of relying on teachers? Let's move to the next slide. We're going to, of course, move the expectations from the individual teacher to the structure of the systems. Our teachers become the first responders, but not sole responders. The question becomes, have we built a system that makes noticing and responding realistic? So we want systems to create clear, easy access points for support. Think this could look like anonymous concern forms built into classrooms, universal wellness check-ins done in maybe one class advisory structures with emotional check-ins are a great place to do that. Drop-in counseling blocks that are normalized throughout the system. And then, of course, that consultation-based support instead of a referral-based support. We want to make sure that mental health does not require perfection in crisis. And we do this unintentionally. Crisis becomes the only entry point. This would be a good question to ask within your own system. Is crisis the only entry point to receiving help? If the answer is yes, then you are in downstream work and not in upstream work. We want to communicate, or what ends up being communicated if it's not a crisis and there isn't an access point for anything other than crisis. The communication is come back when it's worse. You're fine. There's no other signs that you're not fine. So, go on with your day. We don't have capacity unless it's urgent here, which is a very easy one in burned out systems. Next slide. We want to create concrete system support, scheduled consultation time built into the week, clear pathways, who do I talk to when, about what, simple shared language like I talked about earlier, regulated, dysregulated, connection before correction, trying to reframe when a kid is exhibiting behaviors that are easy to call other things like lazy, unmotivated, that the question moves instead to what's going on within the system. And we keep these supports embedded in classrooms, not added on top. Next slide. The next barrier is related to the quiet or marginalized students. We're seeing a high level of students of global majority who are showing up as some of the missed students. They tend to be quiet, compliant, or doing fine academically, and they experience racism, microaggressions, or cultural isolation that is only reinforced by the stigma we put on help seeking in our systems. They also carry their family's stress, their immigration stress, and the community trauma that's going on. And we know this is happening all the time, and it's certainly happening in communities today. And they've learned that visibility can bring risk. And so these kids are being missed. Skip slide. Next slide. Many school systems are designed to respond to disruptions and behavioral referrals and things that look bad in the classroom. But this kind of distress looks like withdrawal, perfectionism, and emotional shutdown, which is often missed. Next slide. When distress doesn't disrupt this classroom, it often doesn't disrupt the system, so we don't think about how the system needs to respond to it. Skip 2 slides on this one for time's sake. What these students internalize is help isn't meant for me. I need to handle this on my own. And then the racial and equity gaps widen over time. So let's talk about solutions. As a system, questions to ask regarding this is, do we have built-in universal supports that don't require self-advocacy? Do we have multiple pathways to signal need, not just referrals, other ways for needs to come in? Invest in relationship-based access, not just crisis thresholds, and normalize support before students have to ask. We can't fix inequity by teaching students to ask louder. We fix it by designing systems that listen better. All right, Hannah, you're next.
Thanks, Janelle. I have three more real or perceived barriers to go over with you real quickly. I am, for the sake of time, I'll probably move quickly, but I think everybody gets the slides, right, Shannon? So if I breeze over stuff, okay, you can go back and check it out. So the next barrier is lack of a strategic alignment. So without strategic alignment, our upstream prevention efforts can stall or even fail to get off the ground. Um, and that's a really big impediment. So if you go to the next slide, I have some examples of how lack of alignment might show up. There's no shared definition of upstream prevention or what success looks like within your district or building. People might see upstream prevention as just one more initiative rather than something that you're building into your core strategy and philosophy. You'll probably hear people don't understand their roles and that they have limited time and capacity to help with upstream prevention efforts. Next slide. So some ideas for getting everybody on the same page would be to reframe what your prevention infrastructure looks like and make sure people know it's not an initiative. So really cement upstream prevention into the foundation of what you do to support students and staff, and then weave those efforts into your existing MTSS or PBIS frameworks. I also think creating a shared problem statement will help get everyone on the same page and align your efforts. This is one area where data is really important. You can use that data to understand what your core challenges are and then create a shared problem statement. Next slide, please, Shannon. These two ideas are part and parcel, clarifying ownership and who makes what decision, as well as differentiating buy-in by role. So depending on whether you're a district leader, a principal, or staff in the building, you're going to have different roles and different levels of buy-in. So once you can identify those, you can really then clarify ownership and who does what when, who has what authority in moving your upstream prevention efforts forward. Next slide, please. So another barrier we identified is not understanding the problem or not having actionable data. So when we don't understand what our problem is, our efforts usually fail, and we're acting on assumption instead of evidence when we don't understand the problem. And without a clear understanding of the problem or data to guide you, we could misdirect our resources, and then the true need will go unmet. And I'm going to steal an example from Dr. Megan Smith that I think you've probably all heard before, but it illustrates this point so nicely. She and her team were working with this school that thought vaping was a huge problem, and they were ready to invest time and resources into addressing vaping. And once they were able to survey their students, they realized that something like 5% of students were vaping, but the large majority of their students were struggling with feelings of isolation and a lack of connectiveness. So they were able to redirect their efforts and their funding to actually address what the problem was. Next slide. So lack of clarity around your problem or lack of data might show up on decisions based on anecdotes or individual incidences. You might be over-relying on your discipline and referral data. There's probably not a shared understanding of the root cause. And remember, prevention or upstream prevention is understanding that root cause and getting ahead of it so it doesn't happen in the first place or snowball into a crisis. And then we might see limited student or staff voice in identifying the problem. Next slide, please. So some ideas to get clarity is to shift from what's happening to why it's happening. And that you can do that by pairing your outcome data with perception data. And then when you do that, you can focus on patterns, longitudinal findings rather than single indicators. I know not everybody is able to implement the Idaho Youth Wellbeing Survey, but there are other data collection tools out there that you could consider implementing that have been validated and are reliable. You could embed them into current processes. You could also consider ways to leverage data that you're already collecting. Often we collect data for the sake of collecting data and might not be doing anything with it, or we might be analyzing in isolation. So combining all your different data sources could help you identify your problem. Next slide. Another idea is to really center student voice. Again, I'm so glad that the Department of Education has partnered with Communities for Youth to implement the Youth Wellbeing Survey, because in the absence of the YRBS, we didn't have student data for a while. So regaining that is really important because we need to ensure that we are hearing from our students and that our priorities reflect their lived experience. I also think developing a shared data review process just so that everybody understands what the data is, why it's being collected, how you're using it long term to support students is important. Next slide, Shannon. Okay, and then our last barrier is a big one. One I hear or get questions about a lot, and that is obtaining written consent from parents to allow students to participate in surveys. A couple years ago, Idaho implemented the Parental Rights Bill, which really shifted the way as a state we're able to collect survey information from our students. And that can be a big impediment to upstream prevention when we don't have that data. Do you want to go to the next slide, Shannon? Lack of consent can show up as low return rates from our parents. Also, parents mistrusting or having uncertainty about the purpose of the survey. It could result in a large administrative burden for schools. And then you might also see gaps in communication or a shared language around understanding how we use data and gaining consent. Next slide. So some ideas to get your parents on board and opting into surveys is to communicate early, clearly, and frequently. I think sharing the purpose and the benefit of the survey well before consent forms goes out could be really beneficial to your efforts. And then also using every channel of communication available to you is helpful. And also framing the survey as a tool for improving student well-being, not just collecting data for the sake of collecting data. I also think perhaps providing more information is a good thing, having a really robust FAQ section that parents can refer to and providing them with information about how confidentiality works and how the data is used is helpful in building trust. Next slide, please. I think embedding consistent routine touch points can be helpful. I know districts that have built the consent process into their registration packets and back to school materials are having a lot of success getting consent. Also leveraging existing electronic portals, I think, is a great idea. I know not everyone can do that, but if you can, I think that goes a long way to reduce the burden on parents when collecting consent. Next slide. Also, if you can follow up with parents systematically after you send out your initial consent forms, having some automated reminders could be helpful. And this could end up actually being a bit of a burden, so take it with a grain of salt. But if you can follow up with personalized requests for opt-in, I think that could also build trust with parents. And then last slide and final idea for getting parents to opt their student in is to engage with them as partners and champions. Find some parents who are interested in previewing the survey content so they understand what's being asked and why. Host informational sessions so that people can ask questions. And then when you have some parents who have bought in, ask them to champion your effort. Potentially, parents are more responsive to other parents, and you could have a lot of success building trust and getting parents to opt their students in. I had one more slide, Shannon, about lowering the burden, but I think we can skip that for the sake of time and move into the case study.
Awesome. Thank you guys. We do have a couple minutes for Q&A. So I wanted to just open it up for a few minutes here for people to ask any questions or get any clarifying answers from you guys. Is there anybody who would like to go first? Go ahead, Megan.
I have a question, and maybe it's for Janelle and Hannah, but I've heard Janelle answer it, so. Um, but I think when the Parents' Rights Bill passed, many schools sort of felt frozen or stuck in place to serve particularly marginalized populations like our LGBTQ youth. And I just find Janelle's response to how schools can still do this really helpful. Sorry to put you on the spot, Janelle.
Yeah, give me a hint of what I answered the last time.
You talked about the ways in which you navigate that consent and the rights of information that parents are able to access and
Yeah.
how you navigate that tricky
Yeah,
scenario.
yeah, it is a really tricky one, but partnership with parents really is an answer there. You know, the law is very clear, you know, that parents have access to all records, everything. But a relational approach where you are in conversation with parents to identify the importance of safe spaces for kids is really at a beginning conversation there. Am I hitting it? Did I get everything? I know this was from the training we did together, right? I want to make sure I got everything there. Yeah, relationship with parents and explaining the importance of safe spaces for kids. At the end of the day, kids' information can be given out, and we need consent for a lot of things. But if we build relationship with parents and talk about access, it seems to go better.
Thank you, Janelle. Other questions, comments, thoughts? Janelle, I just wanted to say I loved your line, teachers are first responder or first observers, not sole responders. I think oftentimes when I was a teacher, you get so many things thrown at you and so many things, and you come to a training like this, and teachers just feel like they have to take on more and take on more and take on more. And I think changing that language from first observer, not sole responder, helps to say like, oh, okay, this is my position here, this is my responsibility, but it's not it's not only my responsibility. And I really appreciated how you worded that. Okay, so we are going to transition over to our case for today. So we have Inspire Connections Academy. They are part of our K-12 upstream cohort. They are unique in that they are an online school. And so we thought that it would be really interesting to highlight what's going on with them. And so, Jody, are you going to present? You're kind of who I've been talking with mostly.
Yeah, so we actually are going to present as a team,
Okay,
and
great.
different people will be talking to different points.
Okay, awesome. I'm going to pull up your slides. I'm assuming you want to go through the slides. That works better.
Yeah,
And then I would say take 5 to 10 minutes to go through this whole thing. And then what we'll do is we'll all come back together and we will talk about kind of next steps, questions, anything like that. And you can just tell me when to advance.
great.
All
right, good morning. My name is Gina Gravenmeyer. I am the school social worker with Inspire and Empower Connections. I am joined today by Sarah McIntosh and Barbie Green, who are our Inspire High School counselors, Elena Gilligan, who is our Empower Alternative High School counselor, and then Jody Huber, who is our manager of counseling services. So we're excited to share with you today. You can go to the next slide. So as she had mentioned, we are a statewide fully virtual public charter school. So we are online. We do serve grades K through 12. Within our school, we have an alternative program as well that is named Empower. The students there do fall under that state criteria for at risk. Right now, our enrollment is approximately 1650. Our enrollment is pretty fluid, though, being that we are an online school, our numbers are changing frequently due to that nature. Just to kind of give you a snapshot, right now we have approximately 314 elementary students, 424 middle school students, 730 high school, and then within our alternative program, 27 eighth graders and 155 high schoolers. So next slide, Jody.
Great. So I'm Jody, and I'm just going to talk a little bit about the data of our school. So when we joined the cohort and we were asked to look at where we could step up our prevention efforts, we did look at our school's data and kind of see where we were at, take an inventory there. So our course passing rates are really high. They're consistently above 90%. We have pretty good attendance as well. A challenge that we have is close to 50% of our student body is new each year. And that high mobility creates some barriers there, which we see in our state testing scores. We see growth in our state testing scores, but overall they take a hit. And what we find is when we track students year over year that are with us, they improve and they do very well. But that 50% of new student body each year really reflects not only in our school data, but also in some of the barriers that we are trying to address. So we chose to focus on our well-being survey. We do our own internal survey, and this is given twice a year. So as you look at the self-management, for example, this is the first number is the fall response, and the second number is the spring response. So for example, relationship skills, students are rating themselves at 60%. They feel like they're strong in that. And then in the springtime, we had a 54% response. Students responding that they're strong in relationship skills or solid in those. So when we looked at the area that we wanted to focus on, we looked at our student connections and our responsible decision making, which, as you can see from the data, those are our lower two scores according to families. Go ahead and go to the next slide. So in that context, we chose to focus on student connection and belonging. That's where we wanted our efforts to be focused on. Engagement is especially challenging in a virtual school environment. We have, as I mentioned, the high mobility. We also have unique demographics. So our student body, we have, it ranges the gamut. We have students who are full agoraphobic. They won't come on camera. They won't talk to you. Very, very extreme, dealing with anxiety and social struggles. And then we have students who are athletes who are competing in rodeo circuits and hockey leagues that are very, very independent, and they really are looking to us for the flexibility that school can provide. We are a Title I school, so we have a high socioeconomic challenge, and we also have a good size of homeless population as well. Another challenge is our statewide boundaries. We don't have the ability as easily to network within our communities and build relationships with like our local college and our local mental health professionals because we're covering such a large geographical area. So we have to build those. It just takes more time to build those. And our knowledge as staff has to be much more diverse in being able to serve students from all areas. And then that lack of captive audience inside a school building, that is a little trickier. When I was in brick and mortar, if a kid was avoiding me, I could find them very casually in the lunchroom or in the hallway or pull them out of class. We have to work around things like that. So when we talked about wanting to build student connection and belonging, we were very aware that we needed to be careful about the energy that our staff had. And those of us that are participating in this cohort, we have a really strong school counseling group. And so we wanted to start where we were and what we could control. And so the next couple of slides are going to address what we have as a whole in place as a school. And then we have taken some additional steps as counselors as a result of this participation. So next slide.
So what are we doing? So we have been implementing the Sources of Strength program. I know many of you are aware of that program. This is our 6th year implementing it, and every year we grow, which is great. So we have elementary, we have middle school, we have high school, and then we obviously have like our peer mentors that make it all roll out. And every month we roll out a campaign, which has been great. And what's been really fun is we've been posting Padlets, which is where students can have a forum to like add about like mental health or the healthy activities they're doing. And so that's like a really nice way for them to connect. Obviously, it's in a different platform, but it is another way of connection. We also have homeroom teachers. So they are typically assigned students. And so every student has a homeroom teacher. So high school teachers, they have usually about 50 to 60 students. It just kind of depends on our enrollment for the year. Our Empower homeroom is usually about 30 students, just because those are our at-risk students, so they need a lot of support. And so we partnership with them a lot. And so with our homeroom teachers, they're the ones that are monitoring our students, and they are the ones that are seeing like, oh, this student hasn't done any schoolwork for 5 days. Hey, school counselor, can you reach out? I can't get in touch with them, so that we are connecting with them as much as possible. We do require contact at least twice a month with trusted adult. And then I'm going to turn it over to our school counselor, Barbie Green. She's going to talk a little bit more about that. But our alternative school does also require contact twice per week, just because those students need a lot of extra support. So I'll turn it over to Barbie.
And I can't underscore enough how important the homeroom teacher role is. Most of our students have at least one class with their homeroom teacher, and it is so important that the most important job of a homeroom teacher is to connect with that student, to learn about them, and for that student to know that someone sees them and cares about them. Our counseling team has a training with staff at the beginning of the year to go over what might be signs that a student or a family is in distress or in need of extra support and resources. We do have a formal referral system using a Google form, but we also encourage teachers to reach out to our counseling team to talk things over, even if they aren't sure it's serious enough. So in addition to the formal referral process, teachers via Google Chat will often ping us to chat about a student situation that they're concerned about. It is written into a high school policy that our counseling team will be asked by homeroom teachers to contact students that are behind in lessons to see what might be going on in their lives before the assistant principal steps in. For example, is the family not able to pay their internet bill? Is the student feeling depressed and the parent is lost in what to try next? As we all know, there are many factors that go into not being engaged in school. Also, we have an internal tracking system that show who in the school is who currently has ownership of the problem or the issue involving the student. However, it's truly a partnership among all of us, the teachers, the school counselor, our assistant principal, the parent. We will try many different avenues, calls, emails, texts, to help encourage the student to engage with school, with their school counselor. Counselors meet one-on-one with all of our seniors. We have a special class just for freshmen and a special class just for seniors to help support them. There's another advisory class for all of our alternative students. Our counseling team does targeted, individualized future planning with the eighth graders as well. In these more structured sessions, we learn about the students. They learn more about us, feel comfortable with us. And in my experience, they're more comfortable sharing when more challenging things come up in their lives. Staff are encouraged to start student clubs. Some of these clubs meet virtually. The puzzle club, for example, meets in the Boise office. But many on this group list will meet virtually and face to face, just a mix of those. The last one, the Positivity Club, is comprised of staff. Everyone on staff is asked to nominate students each month to celebrate them. It could be that maybe they are doing outstanding in a specific class or a project. Maybe it's an improvement they've made, or maybe they helped a peer that was struggling in a Zoom session. Students are doing so many wonderful things, and we want to make sure they feel seen. So the members of the Positivity Club receive the nominations, and they send happy mail, it's a postcard, to the student's house. And we have found that our students love to get things in the mail, and don't we all? Next slide, please. Staff are required to host at least 2 field trips each semester. There is a variety of in-person events as well as virtual. Some are open to all grades and all parents. Others are for a certain grade level or a certain grade band. Every week we have Monday morning announcements. We'll have students speak on certain topics, students or staff speak on certain topics. And we usually end with a quiz game on the week's theme. Recently, for National School Counseling Week, we shared about who we are as a team and what services we provide. And the quiz game was based on that. In January, we started doing breakout groups, broken down in different grade levels as part of morning announcements. We try to personalize a student's experience here to meet their unique needs. We've talked about Empower already. Students can also take IDLA classes at their local school. Some students take classes directly with the college in their community. Something new this semester that we're trying, knowing how much students struggle after they start, when the semester's already started. Those students who roll after, we've started doing a more flexible type of scheduling with those classes to reduce that overwhelm, and it seems to be working well. We already talked about Empower 8. It's its first year, and Ms. Gravenmeyer is doing fabulous with that. Our team, our school staff, we're doing lots of different things, and we're always trying to improve and learn what works, what doesn't, in our very unique environment. But we can't continue to struggle with student and family engagement. Parents opted out of that survey, that internal survey. Most didn't reply at all. And so we don't have a robust data set with that. It's very limited. So we welcome any questions, suggestions, or feedback that you may have for us.
Thank you guys so much for presenting more information about your school. It sounds like you guys are already doing a lot. So I am just going to be quiet here and turn it over to my experts who could have feedback and questions for you guys, and I will just take notes. So who would like to go first? Go ahead, Adam.
Yeah, thanks. That was a fantastic presentation. And from what I can see, you guys absolutely are trying so many different strategies. I would like to hear a little bit more. It doesn't sound like you can feasibly add that many more strategies to the menu. How are you measuring the effectiveness of each of these strategies? And are there ways that you're able to disseminate that data and lean into the more effective strategies and take the less effective strategies off the menu? I guess was something I'd like to hear more about.
In our environment, we we have so much data available to us, so much so that it becomes overwhelming at times. And I think this is my opinion, and team, feel free to come in. But sometimes the ownership of who has that data, is it the admin team? Is it the individual counselor? Is it our counseling team? I think that is perhaps an area where we could focus and improve on. Um, I know that's being done to a certain extent, but I do think that is an area of improvement because we do have the data available and with many of these initiatives.
Yeah, I would agree. Lots and lots of data available. It's targeted data that is a little bit harder to come by, as well as measuring the specific interventions. That is a little trickier also. So for example, when we implemented our morning announcements, the only measurement that we have right now is attendance, which we're getting, a good 100 kids that come to that, which is fabulous. But the effectiveness of that particular intervention as a prevention strategy or even as an intervention strategy is a little bit harder to measure.
Well, and this is where, partnering with folks who have data and evaluation skills, they're like we mentioned in the robust data collection series, where you reach out to like a university or a research partner, could really help you all, because I do hear the like, we're drowning in data and how do we use it adequately and how do we actually measure what we're thinking about measuring? Because I'm like, oh, I can't wait to help you measure that intervention, and I have like 3 ideas right now. And so I think that is where we can really bring our teams together. There are lots of folks who might want to collaborate with you, so that's great. I also want to echo what has been said, which it sounds like you guys are doing a lot of amazing work. And to Adam's point, like a lot. And one of the reasons why it's so important to measure the effectiveness of what you're doing is so that maybe you can find the things that you hone in on and focus your efforts and attention on, and the things you can let go, right? Rather than just persisting and doing all the things, hoping that something is working. Um, the one thing I will say is that there could be some opportunities just in the way I'm hearing from you. And again, I'm like Pollyanna about this, and I apologize. Take me with a grain of salt. Take off your rose-colored glasses. But I think the ways in which we can encourage connection way before we're worried about a kid are really important. And I did hear that you guys are doing that. But finding ways to have fun, play, and joy, like we know that those are the elements that create connection. So are there ways, and I don't have the exact solution here, but like, are there ways to bring fun, play, and joy into your engagement with parents, into your engagement with students? The other idea that came up while you guys were talking is, are there ways to strategically connect kiddos across, or even their parents, to each other? So you know that there's a connection, and how can you kind of facilitate that connection? Another thing that occurred to me is the role modeling, and it sounds like there's a lot of this going on, but the role modeling from your trusted adults for how they're bringing connection into their life, for how they're connecting and doing those things. And so even just sometimes overtly talking about, yeah, I felt really stressed, so I'm gonna go hang out with my friends, because I just love laughing with my friends, or right, and like, or I just connect with Counselor Green, and it's so fun to connect with her. Like, maybe you could next time, those kinds of things. So these kind of more way up front before we're worried about anything, like how do we create that fun and joy? And again, it sounded like you guys were doing a lot of that, but those were just the thoughts that kind of percolated for me as I heard you talk. I just think in the last 10 years, education has gotten so like we have to be academic focused, and we have to, do only the things that are on this piece of paper, and we have to be worried about their mental health. And like in that change, we've lost the beauty of school, which is like creating amazing, epic societies of connected humans. And so that's where I'm always at. Pollyanna out.
Megan, we had a Sources of Strength event last, like a few weeks ago, and we played the Never Gonna Give You Up, Never Gonna Get You Down. And it was this whole dance party with the kids, and kids came on camera, and then I started featuring them while we were in Sources of Strength, and it was so much fun. And I was like, okay, this was another great way to connect with these kids. They loved it. And so, yeah, we are like trying to make it fun, right? Like, let's have some fun.
Yeah, and people forget that that moment is sometimes why a kid will show up again, right? And so, like, people think that that's like goofy, and why would we do that in a school? It's so not academic, but sometimes that's the reason the kid shows up the next day for math class. And so, I think we just lose that sometimes.
The most shocking data point that I heard you guys present was that 50% of your students are new every year. And to me, that's a systemic issue that you're going to have to always be grappling with. And so really focusing on what is that intentional onboarding for this large group of new coming in students look like. That would be an area that I would definitely spend a lot of my energy and attention.
I wanted to make a comment of some things I noticed in your presentation. There's a lot of relational access points, which is really important from a mental health perspective. I'm really impressed with a lot of the things you said, just like everyone said. One thing I would add to what was shared in data collection is specific data around, and maybe you're already doing it, around access points and who is getting in that door at that place? Is it the only one type of student that's getting in, or are we seeing a diversity of students accessing? And you have so many access points that you're going to see probably answers in different ways, but I think that's a worthy piece of information to know.
These are all great. I'm furiously typing in the background to type up all of this information. So, any other thoughts, questions? I'm curious from Inspire Connections if you guys have any last thoughts. We've got about 3 minutes left. Or if anybody on the call who is not a panelist would like to say anything. Okay. Well, so I do just want to mention a couple things here. So whenever a school presents a case, we are taking all of these recommendations and we write them up for you and we try to get them to you within a couple business days so that you guys can have them and have actionable things. I know also Megan mentioned connecting with universities, and Megan, of course, is very uniquely positioned with communities for youth to do this kind of work. And so you guys are always welcome to reach out to her. Her contact information will be on these case recommendations that I send over to you guys so that you can connect with her. And then for our audience members, we are going to have 2 more sessions this year to feature a school. I know for our cohort members, you guys already submitted your case forms, but if you are a cohort member who submitted one and you really want to present, feel free to reach out to me. You can just email me and be like, we really want to present on this, and that way I can kind of reserve it for you. But this has been a really, really lovely, fantastic discussion, and our case presentations are always like the most interesting. No offense, Hannah and Janelle, but they're always the really interesting parts that people are really engaged in. So thank you guys for bringing this case to us. We are going to be back on March 13th, another Friday the 13th next month. We will have our 2 panelists, Norm Stewart and Ann Abbott, talking about data-driven decision-making, intervention, and partner selection. So make sure to come see us then. For our cohort members, you guys should be receiving an email sometime within the next hour with a link to your assignment and also a link to the post-session survey. So just make sure that you guys are on the lookout for that. Thank you guys so much. And Jody, I will be in touch with your case recommendations soon. Thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of your day and a great weekend.